When I first drove down the cracked asphalt lane leading to the farmhouse, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was trespassing on someone else's memory. The paint on the shutters was peeling, the porch sagged with neglect, and the air smelled faintly of mildew and honeysuckle. My Uncle Daniel had left me this property after his sudden heart attack, and though I hadn't set foot here since high school, I knew every inch of it. The tire ruts in the driveway, the oak tree that used to hold my swing, the dilapidated barn with its stubborn red boards. I'd spent my summers here baling hay, fishing in the creek, and learning the value of work. When the lawyer handed me the deed, I thought I was inheriting a place of quiet nostalgia. I didn't realize I was inheriting a war. The trouble started the first week. I was scraping old paint off the barn when a polished black SUV pulled into the drive. Out stepped a woman in a crisp polo shirt embroidered with a gold crest. She carried herself like she owned the county. "I'm Marcia Kent," she announced, her voice honeyed but firm. "President of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. Welcome back." I lowered my scraper. "This property isn't in Willow Creek. It never has been." Her smile tightened. "Oh, but it is now. Your uncle had an informal understanding with us about maintaining community standards. For instance, that barn, its color violates our guidelines. You'll need to repaint it a neutral beige within 30 days. I laughed, thinking she was joking, but she didn't blink. She handed me a violation notice printed on heavy paper, and added, "We also prohibit visible farm equipment and livestock structures that don't align with our aesthetic. I trust you'll do the right thing." Then she glided back into her SUV and left me standing in the dirt, holding a document that felt more like a threat than a suggestion. At first I thought it was a misunderstanding. My uncle had been stubborn, but maybe he had signed something in his last years. I dug through the boxes in his study, sifting through tax receipts and weathered notebooks, until I found a locked drawer at the bottom of his desk. The key dangled from a nail on the wall. Inside was a thick red folder stuffed with survey maps, photographs, and letters. The documents were meticulous. Boundary markers photographed and dated, notes about meetings with the county, letters from Willow Creek HOA offering to buy the property. The last page, scrawled in his uneven hand, read, "They're desperate, pushing harder. Don't give an inch." My uncle had known exactly what they were doing, creeping past the boundary lines, shifting posts, and trying to strangle him into selling. The next day, I walked the property line. Sure enough, the markers had been moved inward, their shiny white posts standing 20 feet closer than I remembered. My uncle's old stone markers, half buried and moss-covered, still sat where they always had. The HOA hadn't made a mistake. They'd stolen ground. Rage burned in my chest as I stood over the false boundary. This farm had been in my family for 3 generations. They thought they could erase that with paint swatches and paperwork. That night, a manila envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Inside were printed photographs. My truck parked by the barn. Me hammering a loose board. Me sitting on the porch drinking a beer. Every shot taken from just beyond the tree line. A note at the bottom read, "You don't belong here. Sell before it gets worse." My hands shook as I folded the letter back into the envelope. It was no longer about barn paint or property lines. They were watching me, daring me to push back. I needed help. At the county records office, I met Claire Benson, a librarian moonlighting as an amateur historian. She wore flannel and jeans, her hair coiled into a ponytail. When I asked about Willow Creek's development, her eyes narrowed. "My parents used to own the orchard on Hill Road," she said. "Lost it after they fought the HOA over runoff damage from their new homes. Bank foreclosed in 6 months. Guess who bought it at auction? The same developers who run Willow Creek." Her bitterness matched my own. She pulled maps from the archives, showing how Willow Creek had expanded in phases, each time swallowing more land through dubious rezoning and intimidation. "Your uncle was the last holdout," she said quietly. "They need your land for access to the highway. Without it, their big commercial project stalls. That's why they won't stop." For the first time, I understood the scale of what I was up against. This wasn't just about my farm. It was about a machine that had ruined families for years. The harassment escalated quickly. My irrigation system was smashed by tire tracks leading back toward Willow Creek. No trespassing signs with the HOA logo appeared on my fence line. A county inspector showed up unannounced, citing me for code violations I'd never heard of. And then the final blow, an email from my company's HR department informing me my remote job had been eliminated. My only steady income was gone, leaving me dangling over the edge of financial ruin. I didn't need to guess who had made the call. Marcia Kent's husband sat on the board of a firm that did business with my employer. The timing was no coincidence. One night, while reviewing my uncle's red folder again, I noticed a reference to MH paperwork. Claire helped me track it down. Margaret Holt, a retired environmental attorney. She lived in a modest house surrounded by native plants and solar panels. When I explained my situation, she nodded knowingly. "Your uncle was working with me," she said. He planned to place key sections of the farm, including the creek, under a conservation easement. That creek feeds into the county reservoir. Once the easement is filed, no one can touch it. It becomes permanent. My pulse quickened. "Can we still file?" Her eyes glinted. "Yes, but the HOA won't wait quietly. You'll need evidence and allies." Evidence arrived faster than expected. At a town hall meeting, the Willow Creek Board unveiled glossy renderings of Oak Ridge Village, a sprawling lifestyle center with boutiques and restaurants. My farm was drawn right in the middle of their plans, labeled Future Access Road. I stood up. "That's my property. It's not for sale." The room buzzed. Marcia Kent smiled sweetly. "We're in discussions with all landowners, and we're confident of a positive outcome." Claire stood beside me, her voice sharp. "That's a lie. My family was destroyed by the same tactics: harassment, false violations, foreclosure." How many others here have been bullied by Willow Creek? Hands began to rise across the room. The commissioner banged his gavel, but the mood had shifted. People were no longer silent. The Kents weren't as untouchable as they thought. The next morning, I found fresh tire marks near my well system. A metal pipe had been deliberately cracked. Then came the final warning, an unmarked envelope with the words, "Farms are dangerous places. Accidents happen." I filed a report, but the sheriff, wary of the HOA's influence, offered little comfort. I realized I couldn't rely on the law. I had to fight on their terms. So I set a trap. I listed the farm in the— "Glad you've come to your senses," he said. "Let's finalize this." The offer he slid across the table was insultingly low. I pretended to hesitate. "What about the creek?" I asked. "You can't build an access road through it." He waved a hand dismissively. "We'll culvert it. Adjust the environmental impact statement." Already arranged. My phone, hidden on the table, recorded every word. Proof of fraud. Proof of intent to destroy protected land. With Claire and Margaret's help, I rushed to file the conservation easement paperwork. At the same time, Claire leaked the recording and boundary documents to a sympathetic reporter. When the Kents returned to close the deal, expecting me to sign, they found the sheriff, an environmental officer, and the reporter waiting in my kitchen. I laid the documents across the table. "This land is under a permanent conservation easement. The creek is a protected watershed." And here, I press play on my phone. Robert's voice spilling into the room is proof you knew it. Marcia's face drained of color. Robert tried to bluster, but the sheriff cut him off. "We'll need statements, and you might want to call your attorney." The fallout was swift. The regional paper ran the story on its front page. The state attorney's office opened an investigation into Willow Creek's fraudulent practices. 2 commissioners resigned under scrutiny. The HOA board ousted Marcia within weeks. Robert faced charges of environmental fraud. For the first time, the machine choked on its own arrogance. A year later, the farm looked nothing like the place I inherited. The barn gleamed with fresh red paint. The creek was lined with wildflowers, its banks protected forever. We built community garden plots where kids learned to grow vegetables. Claire moved into the farmhouse with me, her passion for history blending with my stubborn pride in the land. On weekends, neighbors who once feared the HOA worked side by side in the fields. The fear that had gripped this valley for so long had loosened. People were standing tall again. Sometimes I walked to the old oak tree at the edge of the property, the swing long gone, but its branch still stretching wide. I think of my uncle's final words, "Don't give an inch." He knew this fight was bigger than him, bigger than me. It was about legacy, about protecting what matters from those who see land as nothing but profit. Looking out at the fields, hearing laughter where there used to be silence, I finally understand. The true harvest isn't just what grows in the soil. It's what endures when you refuse to surrender.